Hello and welcome to the State of the Fleet Industry video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine and sponsored by Enterprise Fleet Management. I'm Mike Antich, editor of Automotive Fleet, and today I'd like to examine what's occurring in the fleet industry for the week of February 1, 2021. And for those of you who've watched prior State of the Fleet Industry reports, you know that for a long time I've anticipated that there will be a strong surge in 2021 commercial fleet orders this spring. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And in many ways, this is shaping up to be what I'm terming a lost spring market. So what do I mean by that? Well, during the months of December and January, there were a slew of announcements of final order cutoff dates from General Motors, Ford, FCA, Nissan, and so on. And as a result of these early order cutoffs, the majority of fleet orders placed afterwards for these models will now be delivered as 2022 models. And there's a combination of reasons as to why these early order cutoffs occurred, ranging from the introduction of all new replacement models to a strong retail market that's competing for the same units desired by commercial fleets. But these early order cutoffs for 2021 models will now require fleets to instead order 2022 models sometime between March and May when the order banks open, depending on the make and model, for a November to December delivery timeframe. And as a result, these early order cutoffs have taken a lot of the steam out of the anticipated volume of spring orders that I had expected for the 2021 models based on my conversations and surveys with many commercial fleet managers around the country. So needless to say, the 2021 model year has been a difficult year for sourcing fleet vehicles, perhaps the most difficult one ever, at least in current memory. So with that said, what else is happening in the fleet market? One big announcement that occurred on January 25th was when President Biden said that the federal government will replace its entire 645,000 vehicle fleet with electric vehicles. And to appreciate the magnitude of this commitment, you need to understand that currently the federal government only operates 3,215 electric vehicles. So as you can see, this is an epic commitment, and it'll be an epic endeavor. And it will also be an expensive endeavor. It's anticipated that it'll cost $20 billion to convert the entire federal fleet. I listened to President Biden's announcement when he made it, and he said that the government's desire is to buy EVs that are made in the US, built by US workers, and who are union members. But as they say, the devil's in the details, especially since federal purchases are governed by numerous procurement rules. And unless there are procurement exemptions, this may disqualify some OEMs who build electric vehicles. Now, take the example of the desire to only want to buy vehicles built by union labor. So for instance, the largest manufacturer of EVs by volume is Tesla, but its workforce is not unionized. Would this preclude the federal government from acquiring Tesla products? And as for acquiring US-made EVs, according to the US government's procurement rules, to be considered US-made, 50% of a vehicle's components need to be manufactured in the US. And not all EVs currently sold in the US meet this threshold. This may require another exemption in order to make sure that there's an expansion of the pool of electric vehicles that are out there from which the government can select from. But one saving grace to President Biden's commitment to a zero emissions federal fleet is that there's no deadline, for the government to convert its entire fleet to EVs. So when President Biden signed the Buy America executive order on January 25th, 2021, it did not anywhere reference specifically electric vehicles, which, as some say, will allow for these exemptions. And as some of you may remember, this isn't the first time that the US government has attempted to change the composition of the federal fleet so that its vehicles do not burn fossil fuels. And for those of you who remember, the Energy Policy Act of 1992, or EPACT as it's known, was signed into law by President George Bush Sr., to mandate that the federal government transition away from vehicles that burn fossil fuels. And at that time, the purpose of the law was to contribute to US energy independence by reducing the volume of imported crude oil. And the 1992 law mandated that the federal government acquire 5,000 alternative fueled vehicles in the first year of its enactment, which would increase each year thereafter, so that by fiscal year 1999, it would require 75% of all federal government new vehicle purchases to be alternative fueled vehicles. So while EPAC is still the law, the vehicle buying mandates of the Energy Policy Act have not been enforced. Even the governmental agency that would enforce the buying mandates, the U.S. Department of Energy, was unable to comply itself with this buying mandate. And as was the case in 1992, will be the case currently, converting the world's largest vehicle fleet to non-petroleum based fuels is a monumental task, to say the least. And we will be following how this conversion to a zero emissions fleet unfolds in future reports. But since our time is running short, let me cover in bullet point some of the other big fleet developments that have occurred in the past 2 weeks. First, General Motors announced that all vehicles it will produce in 2035 will be zero emission vehicles, which will include battery electric EVs and fuel cell models. Earlier, GM announced that it will supply its Hydrotech fuel cells to Navistar to be built in its trucks that will be piloted by J.B. Hunt Transport Services in 2022 in a test program. And another ongoing development is that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is now deliberating on adopting EV sales mandates similar to that of the state of California, which would require all new light-duty vehicles sold in Massachusetts to be EVs by 2035. And finally, the automotive microchip shortage is ongoing, and it's continuing to result in production slowdowns and temporary plant shutdowns. However, the microchip shortage has now escalated, and it's escalated to the point that it's now involving the US government and separately the German government, whose representatives are now speaking directly with Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which is the key global supplier of automotive microchips, and they're asking it to increase the supply of microchips to their automotive industries. And we're going to continue to follow these developments in upcoming reports. But until then, I'd like to conclude my State of the Industry presentation for the week of February 1, 2021, and I want to thank you for listening.